This world wasn't built to handle collapse, and neither were we. Let's face it, we've grown soft. We flip a switch for heat, tap an app for food, and trust our safety to passwords and gadgets. But what happens when the systems we rely on fail? When the trucks stop delivering, the power grid goes dark, and the stores are empty. Spoiler alert, your fancy tech won't save you. What will save you are the skills your grandparents called just life. And that's exactly what this video is about. In the next few minutes, I'm breaking down 10 forgotten skills that kept entire families alive through wars, rationing, economic meltdowns, and full-blown blackouts. These aren't theories or prepper fantasies. These are real, no-nonsense practices that don't need electricity, stores, or even cash. Just your two hands and the guts to learn. Here's the deal. The warnings aren't whispers anymore. Grid failures are rising, inflation's out of control, and modern homes, they're fragile as hell. While most people panic buy junk they don't need, the smart ones are quietly mastering the skills that kept our ancestors alive. In this video, I'll show you how to turn soap scraps into full bars, store food without a fridge, heat a bed without power, and more. By the end, you won't just feel prepared, you'll realize the power to survive has been in your family tree all along. So let me ask you, have you ever seen someone mend a shirt by hand? Do you know how to grow your own food? Can you even recognize the smell of lye soap? If not, what you're about to learn might just be the most valuable thing you hear all year. Let's get into it. 10 Clay Pot Stability Hack. The life-saving anchor you didn't know you needed. You see a cracked clay pot sitting in the corner of your yard, dull and chipped, and you're ready to toss it in the trash. But here's the thing. In a blackout, that broken piece of pottery could mean the difference between a hot meal and going hungry. When the power goes out, cooking becomes a challenge most people aren't ready for. Your pots wobble on uneven coals, flames flicker unpredictably, and water boils over, turning your dinner into a disaster. But your grandma, she had a solution for that. She didn't need fancy tools or modern gadgets. She used what she had: garden clay, water, and shards of broken pottery. She'd mix the clay and water into a smooth paste, then press it around the base of her cooking pot, creating a thick, even layer. Once it dried, it became a fireproof, stable anchor that could handle uneven ground, shifting coals, and even strong winds. This wasn't just a clever trick, it was survival science. That clay anchor kept pots steady, insulated them from direct flames, and made cooking over an open fire not just possible, but reliable. No screws, no tools, no over-engineered designs, just raw, practical ingenuity. When the grid fails, your modern appliances will be nothing more than useless hunks of metal and plastic. But a clay-anchored pot, that's a tool you can count on. It doesn't just cook your food, it protects it. It keeps your stew from spilling into the fire and your hands from getting burned. And in a world where every meal counts, that's survival. So before you throw out that broken pot, think twice. Your grandma didn't see trash, she saw potential. She didn't wait for instructions or rely on someone else to solve her problems. She shaped her own solutions with her hands, her clay, and her determination. If you've ever seen someone use a trick like this, share it in the comments. Your memory might just save someone else's life. 9. Aluminum foil. The survival tool you're throwing away. You unwrap your sandwich, crumple the foil, and toss it in the trash without a second thought. But your grandma, she'd have saved that foil like it was gold. And honestly, she wasn't wrong. Aluminum foil isn't just a convenience, it's a survival tool, and in a collapse, it could be worth more than cash. Your grandma knew that foil wasn't garbage. It was a shield, a barrier, a tool with endless uses. After dinner, she'd smooth out every wrinkle, fold it neatly, and stash it in a drawer. That same piece of foil would get used again and again. Sometimes to wrap leftovers, sometimes to line the oven, and sometimes for things you'd never think of. She'd use it to sharpen scissors, cover broken windows in the winter, reflect heat back into a cold room, or even cook entire meals in the fireplace when the gas was out. And in a collapse, that thin sheet of foil becomes a lifeline. It reflects heat, insulates food, and even shields electronics from static. When windows break or drafts creep in, foil plugs the gaps faster than you can Google what to do. The real danger: you won't notice the heat leaking from your walls until your breath fogs in your own living room. You won't realize your food is cooling too fast until your body starts to follow. And by the time you figure out you needed that sheet of foil, it'll be too late. That's why your grandma saved everything. Not because she was poor, but because she was prepared. She didn't live in waste. She lived in awareness. And in a world where supply chains fail and prices spike, that mindset is priceless. So the next time you flatten a piece of foil, stop and think. In the right hands, it's more than trash. It's a heat trap, a barrier, a survival essential. If your grandma ever saved something you'd normally throw away, share it in the comments. Her wisdom might just be the key to someone else's survival. 8. Soap from ashes and fat, the forgotten skill that could save your life. Most people look at ashes and see waste. Your grandma? She saw opportunity. When the fire burned low and the food was gone, she didn't see the end. She saw the beginning of something essential. She knew that the gray dust left behind wasn't just trash. It was fuel for survival. Here's how it worked. She'd save those ashes, sift them, and run water through them until a brown liquid trickled out. That was her lie. No labels, no warnings, just knowledge passed down through generations. Then came the fat. Not store-bought oils or fancy coconut blends, but the scraps most people throw away. Bacon grease, beef drippings, the forgotten leftovers at the bottom of the pan. She'd mix the lye and fat carefully, stirring for hours with nothing but a wooden spoon and instinct. Slowly, the mixture would thicken into a paste. It wasn't pretty, and it definitely wasn't perfumed, but it was powerful. She'd pour it into trays, let it harden, and slice it into bricks. This wasn't soap like you know it. It didn't make you smell nice. It kept you alive. She used it to clean wounds, wash linens, and scrub her hands raw after a long day. Because when the doctor isn't coming, disease is always knocking. The invisible danger: you won't see bacteria spreading across your skin. You won't feel the fever rising until it's too late. And a simple cut can turn deadly faster than you think. That's why this skill wasn't just clever, it was life-saving. Your grandma didn't panic when the stores were empty. She didn't beg for supplies. She used what she had and got to work. If you've ever heard of a trick like this, share it in the comments. It might be the one thing that keeps someone else alive. 7 earth ovens. Cooking without power. The ancient way. When the lights go out and the stove stops working, most people panic. They think reheating food in the dark means cold leftovers and wasted calories. But your grandma, she knew better. Long before microwaves and electric stoves, she used the earth itself to cook and reheat meals. It's called an earth oven, and it's as brilliant today as it was thousands of years ago. Here's how it worked. After a meal, she'd dig a shallow pit, heat stones until they glowed, and pack them around a clay-lined space. She'd lay green leaves for moisture, nestle the food inside, and cover it all with earth. Then she'd walk away. Hours later, the meal would emerge steaming warm and perfectly cooked, not with power, but with the heat of the earth itself. This method isn't just clever, it's ancient. Archaeologists have found evidence of earth ovens dating back over 10,000 years, from ancient America to the deserts of Australia. It's a testament to human ingenuity and the power of working with nature, not against it. When the grid fails or a storm knocks out your power, you can't rely on modern appliances. But an earth oven, it's collapse-proof, generator-proof, and wildfire-proof. The invisible danger: you won't feel hunger at first. You won't notice your food cooling until your energy starts to lag, and your body begins to shake. During prolonged blackouts, shelters with wood-fired pits kept meals hot while others scrambled for microwave batteries. They stayed warm, fed, and focused, all thanks to a method as old as time. So the next time your dinner goes cold and the lights fade, don't search for power. Go underground, literally. Build an earth oven, cover it, and let it do its magic. Your grandma didn't just feed her family, she gave them warmth, hope, and a way to survive. 6 Fireplace ash, the secret fertilizer for indoor survival gardens. You glance at the pile of ash next to your fireplace and think trash. But your grandma, she saw life. When the ground froze solid in winter and fresh food was a distant memory, she turned to her indoor plants for sustenance. And the secret to keeping those plants alive and thriving? Ash from her hardwood fires. Here's how she did it. She'd scoop up the cooled ash, sift out any large chunks, and sprinkle a thin layer over the soil in her pots. Not a lot, just enough to lightly dust the surface. To most people, it looked like nothing more than gray residue, but to her, it was a powerhouse of nutrients. Ash is rich in potassium and calcium, two essential elements that plants need to grow strong and healthy. It also helps balance soil acidity, keeping the roots stable and the plants vibrant. Over time, that thin layer of ash worked its magic, strengthening the soil structure, encouraging deep roots, and ensuring her indoor garden could produce herbs, greens, and even small vegetables. In a collapse, when grocery stores are empty and fresh produce is a luxury, knowing how to keep an indoor garden alive could mean the difference between health and malnutrition. Those herbs and greens aren't just food, they're medicine, vitamins, and survival. But here's the invisible danger. Most people don't realize how quickly their bodies can weaken without proper nutrients. Thin leaves and weak stems in your plants mean thin blood and weak bodies in your family. Grandma didn't let that happen. She knew food wasn't just what came from the kitchen, it was what she grew inside. Parsley, mint, chives, and sage, all kept alive and thriving with a little help from the ash she saved. And here's the kicker. You won't find ash fertilizer on store shelves or in online survival kits, but when the grid goes down and the supply chain collapses, you'll still have a way to keep your plants and your family alive. So the next time you clean out your fireplace, don't toss the ashes. Scoop them, dry them, and use them. Because Grandma didn't see waste, she saw a lifeline. 5. DIY Vinegar Cleaner. Grandma's secret to a germ-free home. You think staying clean is about buying sprays with fancy labels, antibacterial wipes, and bleach that smells like a chemical factory. But what happens when the shelves are empty? The trucks stop delivering, and your dollar can't even buy a bottle of cleaner. That's when you'll wish you had your grandma's secret recipe for a homemade cleaning spray that's cheap, effective, and powerful enough to keep sickness at bay. Here's how she did it. She'd start with white vinegar, just a cup, and mix it with an equal amount of water. Then came the magic ingredient. Citrus peels, lemon, orange, grapefruit, whatever was left over from the kitchen. She'd toss it into the vinegar and let it soak for a week. The acid in the vinegar would pull the oils from the peels, creating a natural antibacterial solution that smelled fresh, not like chemicals. Sometimes she'd add a pinch of baking soda for extra scrubbing power or a drop of dish soap to cut through grease. But the base formula was always the same: vinegar, water, and citrus. One spray bottle, one simple recipe, and an entire house that stayed clean through wars, winters, and economic collapses. Here's what most people forget. Cleanliness isn't just about appearances. It's your first line of defense against germs, sickness, and infection. And when medicine is scarce and doctors aren't coming, a clean home can mean the difference between health and disaster. The invisible threat: you won't see the bacteria building up on your counters. You won't feel the germs spreading through your home. And by the time someone starts coughing or running a fever, it might already be too late. Grandma didn't wait for store-bought solutions. She didn't need chemicals with warning labels or sprays that cost a fortune. She used what she had: vinegar, peels, and thyme. And it worked. So the next time you wipe down your kitchen, ask yourself, could you do it without the store? Because she did. And if she could, so can you. If your grandma ever taught you a trick like this, share it in the comments. Her wisdom might just save someone else's home. 4. Citrus peel and salt cleaner. The forgotten scrub that works like magic. You peel an orange, toss the rind in the trash, and move on with your day. But your grandma, she saw those peels as treasure. Long before cleaning sprays lined store shelves, she had a method that cut grease, killed bacteria, and neutralized odors, all with nothing more than kitchen scraps and a little salt. Here's how it worked. She'd take the peels, orange, lemon, grapefruit, whatever she had, and pack them tightly into a jar. Then she'd sprinkle in coarse salt, enough to fill the gaps between the peels. Once the jar was full, she'd seal it and set it on a sunny windowsill. Over the next few days, the salt would draw out the oils from the peels, creating a fragrant, briny solution that was as effective as it was simple. When it was time to clean, she'd pull out a softened peel, dip it in the brine, and scrub away. Countertops, cutting boards, cast iron pans, nothing was off limits. The natural acids in the citrus cut through grease, the salt provided grit for scrubbing, and the oils left everything smelling fresh and clean. And here's the best part: the jar wasn't a one-and-done deal. When the brine ran low, She'd add more salt or fresh peels and let it brew again. It was a self-sustaining cleaning system that worked as long as she had citrus and salt. In a collapse, when soap is scarce and cleaning supplies are a distant memory, this method isn't just clever, it's essential. You can't afford to let bacteria take over your kitchen or let grease build up on your tools, and the invisible danger. You won't see the germs hiding in your sink or feel the bacteria multiplying on your counters until it's too late. Grandma didn't need fancy sprays or expensive cleaners. She used what she had and made it work. So the next time you peel an orange, think twice before tossing the rind. Save it, salt it, and let it brew. Because when the grid goes down and the stores are empty, you'll need creativity, not cash. 3. Wool scrap insoles. The cold-fighting secret hidden in your closet. When the power goes out and the temperature drops, the cold doesn't just creep in, it attacks, and it starts with your feet. That icy chill rising from the ground isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Cold feet can lead to frostbite, hypothermia, and a whole host of problems you don't want to deal with when survival is already hard enough. But your grandma? She had a solution so simple, it's almost genius. Wool scrap insoles. She didn't need heated socks or battery-powered gadgets. She didn't need to plug anything in or wait for a delivery. She used what she had, old wool scraps from sweaters, scarves, or blankets, and turned them into life-saving insoles. Here's how she did it. Grandma would take those leftover pieces of wool and layer them until they were thick enough to act as a cushion. Then she'd cut them to match the shape of her shoe's sole. Sometimes she'd add a layer of felt for extra padding, but the real magic was in the wool itself. Wool is a natural insulator. It traps heat, wicks away moisture, and keeps your feet warm even if they get damp. Once the insoles were ready, she'd slip them into her boots or shoes, and just like that, she had a portable heat source that didn't rely on electricity or batteries. The wool created a barrier between her feet and the freezing ground, keeping the cold at bay and her body temperature stable. Here's the thing most people don't realize. Frostbite doesn't announce itself. You won't feel it creeping into your toes until it's too late. You won't notice your body's core temperature dropping until you're already in danger. But with wool insoles, you're not just keeping your feet warm, you're protecting your entire body. During winter blackouts, shelters reported that people with homemade wool insoles stayed warmer and avoided hypothermia, while others scrambled for high-tech solutions that didn't work without power. Grandma's method. It was simple, effective, and blackout-proof. So the next time you see a pile of wool scraps, don't toss them. Cut them, layer them, and turn them into insoles. Because when the grid fails and the cold sets in, those scraps could be the difference between comfort and catastrophe. If your grandma ever shared a trick like this, drop it in the comments. Her wisdom might just save someone else's toes. Dry leaf insulation. Nature's free thermal blanket. You see dry leaves piling up in your yard and think, time to rake and toss. But your grandma, she saw them as a gift from nature, a free, renewable source of insulation that could keep her family warm when the cold crept in and the power went out. When the grid fails and the temperature drops, heat doesn't just disappear, it escapes. It seeps out through cracks in the walls, under doors, and through windows. And if you're not prepared, that loss of heat can turn a cold night into a deadly one. But Grandma had a solution: dry leaf insulation. Here's how it worked. She'd gather clean, dry leaves, crisp and crunchy, not damp or moldy, and use them to create layers of insulation. She'd stuff them into pillowcases or old sacks and line them along the base of doors to block draft. She'd tuck them between window frames and curtains to stop the cold air from sneaking in. And when it came to staying warm at night, she'd layer those leaves between blankets or even inside her clothing. The secret was in the air pockets. Dry leaves trap air, and air is a natural insulator. By creating layers of leaves, she was essentially building a thermal barrier that kept the warmth in and the cold out. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. Here's the invisible danger most people don't think about. You don't notice heat escaping until it's gone. You don't feel the cold settling into your bones until you're shivering uncontrollably. And by the time you realize your body temperature is dropping, it might already be too late. Grandma didn't wait for expensive solutions or high-tech gadgets. She used what was free, abundant, and effective. And during prolonged blackouts, families who used dry leaf insulation reported staying warmer and more comfortable than those who relied on store-bought solutions that failed when the power went out. So the next time you see a pile of leaves, Don't just sweep them away. Gather them, dry them, and use them. Because when the cold comes and the grid is down, those leaves could be the difference between a warm night and a freezing one. If your grandma ever showed you a trick like this, share it in the comments. Her resourcefulness might just inspire someone else to survive. 1. Survival wisdom. The blueprint for staying warm without power. When the power goes out and the world goes dark, most people panic. They scramble for electric blankets, space heaters, and anything else that plugs into a wall. But your grandma, she didn't have those luxuries. She had something better: survival wisdom. Grandma knew that staying warm wasn't about relying on technology, it was about using what you had and making it work. She didn't wait for someone to sell her a solution, she created her own. She knew how to layer clothing to trap heat, how to use natural materials like wool and leaves to insulate her home, and how to build fires that burned efficiently and safely. She understood that warmth wasn't just about comfort, it was about survival. Here's the thing. Most people don't realize how quickly the cold can become dangerous. You don't feel your body temperature dropping until it's already happening. You don't notice the signs of hypothermia until it's too late. But Grandma didn't wait for the cold to take over. She prepared for it. She used wool scraps to make insoles that kept her feet warm. She stuffed dry leaves into cracks and crevices to block drafts. She layered blankets and clothing to create pockets of trapped air that held heat, and she did it all without electricity, without gadgets, and without spending a dime. During blackouts, families who followed these old-school methods stayed warm and safe, while others froze in their high-tech homes. Grandma's wisdom wasn't just practical, it was life-saving. So the next time you're tempted to rely on modern conveniences, remember this: they're only as reliable as the grid. And when the grid fails, it's Grandma's skills that will keep you alive. If your grandma ever shared a piece of survival wisdom that stuck with you, drop it in the comment. Her knowledge might just be the key to someone else's survival. When the world as we know it falters, when the lights go out, the trucks stop running, and the shelves go bare, what will you rely on? It won't be your gadgets, your apps, or your modern conveniences. It'll be the skills, the knowledge, and the resourcefulness that our grandmochic fathers lived by every single day. These 10 skills aren't just nostalgic throwbacks to a simpler time. They're survival blueprints, carved out of necessity and honed through generations. They're proof that resilience doesn't come from technology. It comes from knowing how to adapt, how to create, and how to thrive with what you have. Grandma didn't wait for someone to save her. She didn't rely on systems that could fail or products that could run out. She used her hands, her mind, and the resources around her to keep her family safe, warm, and fed. And in a world where collapse feels closer than ever, her wisdom is worth more than gold. So what's the takeaway? Start learning. Start practicing. Start seeing the potential in the things you'd normally throw away. Because when the grid goes down and the world feels uncertain, it won't be your Wi-Fi password or your online shopping cart that saves you. It'll be the skills you've learned, the knowledge you've preserved, and the ingenuity you've inherited. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of the curve. You're not just scrolling past the warnings, you're paying attention. And that's the first step toward resilience. So take what you've learned here, share it, practice it, and pass it on. Because the skills that kept our grandmothers alive might just be the ones that save us all. What skills did your grandma teach you? Drop them in the comments because her wisdom could be someone else's lifeline.